Outside the gates of an Israeli military prison, two proud parents wait for their daughter to be released. 18-year-old Sophia has just finished a 20-day jail term. Her crime? She's one of only two conscientious objectors since the war in Gaza began, refusing Israel's compulsory military service.
Yeah, maybe go to the shade.
Yeah.
I'm very hot.
How do you feel? Was it worth it?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Yes. Long answer, I mean, it's hard. It's important for me personally to make that stand and to resist the notion that all soldiers are heroes and they are protecting the country instead of continuing a cycle of violence.
Right now, with the atmosphere around the war in Gaza, you're a tiny, tiny minority.
I've gotten called in prison, straight up face-to-face, a traitor. And I think that most of the country thinks of me as a traitor because people split it into us versus them. And I don't see it that way at all. I don't see any us and them here.
But very few Israelis see the conflict the way Sophia does. Tel Aviv is just 50 miles up the coast from northern Gaza, but you wouldn't know there's a war raging nearby.
Oof. One of the more damning aspects of this is just to constantly show daily existence. Only a couple miles on either side of the Israeli-built border wall that separates the Gazan population and the population living inside of Israel proper. Straight up, yep, zone of interest, dude. Straight the up zone of interest. Jonathan Glazer was absolutely right.
Posters calling for the release of Israeli hostages still held by Hamas, a reminder of the trauma of the October 7th attacks. The enormity of the daily trauma suffered by Palestinians in Gaza as a result of Israel's assault simply isn't seen by most people in Israel.
We've been looking at coverage of the war on Israeli TV and have analysed last week's main evening news bulletins on all the most popular channels. Over the course of the 5 days that we examined, there was not a single clip of a Palestinian in Gaza describing what they're going through. Only at times images of people rushing towards aid or of destruction.
Yeah. This also portrays the narrative that Palestinians are barbaric, they're brutal, they're monsters. They can't even receive aid in an orderly fashion because they're being starved, obviously. So that actually plays well for the Israeli population and reaffirms their opinion. So that's part of the reason why they, like I talked about before, they executed the dude who was trying to maintain orderly lines in the receiving of humanitarian aid that is desperately needed.
There is plenty of coverage of the war, but barring a few exceptions, it's all through the lens of Israeli soldiers or the families of hostages.
Some newspapers do take a more critical stance, but their readership is comparatively much smaller.
Would it be realistic that people don't have an idea of what's really going on? Or
it is realistic because, people live in the comfort zone of denial and they don't want to know anything that might affect their predispositions. The Israeli public is getting from the Israeli media a very government-oriented, military-oriented picture.
Why is that?
Because of that devastation and that humiliation and that anger that October 7th evoked.
Would it be fair to say that even now there's a large section of the...
My girlfriend's father is constantly saying that all this destruction is due to Hamas. What can I show him to explain that this destruction is a result of Israel? He constantly says that Hamas is the one using hospitals, such as a shield or something similar. Ask him where the evidence is for that, because Israel has claimed time and time again that that's happening. And in Western media, months after the fact, but still, usually in American media, you'll see articles basically saying maybe not necessarily the case. Now, the problem is if your potential future father-in-law is this invested in eating the Zionist lies, okay, then I don't think that you can change his mind. Another thing you can ask is if you and your girlfriend were stuck in a school with, let's say, a school shooter, right? Would he be okay with the entire block being lit up by the police? That line doesn't work, bro. My mom literally said it was fine, remember? Yeah, I mean, it just depends. I think the reality is you can't really reason with a lot of people, especially this far in to the ethnic cleansing campaign. That's just the reality. He just spews right-wing YouTube statements all the damn time. Yeah, he's just on right-wing YouTube constantly.
The population that views the entirety of Gaza as complicit with October the 7th.
Sure, you get that all the time. You get to ask the guy who's crossing the street right now, and tell you they're all the same. 2.5 million Palestinians in Gaza, they're all Hamas, which is not true, but that's the sentiment.
The space for dissenting voices is shrinking when this Israeli filmmaker won an international award for a documentary with a Palestinian colleague in the West Bank. His speech was slammed as anti-Semitic, and he faced death threats.
I'm free to move where I want in this land. Basel is, like millions of Palestinians, locked in the occupied West Bank. This situation of apartheid between us, this inequality, it has to end.
Israelis are taking to the streets every weekend.
Arrest him. Yo, you can't be talking that in Berlin, man. That's excuse me, meine Judenfriend, you're sounding kind of anti-Semitic. Maybe we will arrest you after this speech is done, okay? You know, as we have done many times over the course of the past couple of months, yeah? Yeah. Du bist antisemitisch. Antisemitisch. Do not use that accent as an ick of mine. Yeah.
This a demonstration calling for a deal to be done now to bring the hostages home. This one, just down the road, is calling on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to stand down. There is some sympathy for civilians in Gaza, but the focus primarily is on Israeli suffering. It's only a much...
German politicians literally said they agree with the Jewish guy of the duo, but not the Palestinian, despite them saying the same thing. It's insane here. Yeah, dude, Germans are completely out of control, okay? I don't know what to say about it. I mean, I've talked about it a lot, but like, once I saw the German anti-fascists, German leftists, okay, throwing like, I hate this country, man. Not even anything witty to say about this country going the extra mile to defend the mass murder in Gaza because doing otherwise would offend German sensibilities. Remember, yeah, and that was anti-Deutsche, the aggro German anti-fascists, the anarchists, doing their very best to defend Israel and defend and destroy anti-Semitism by literally throwing a big brick through a bakery that was holding like a pro-Palestinian gathering, and then dumping lard, like pig fat, in the fucking bakery. Like doing a fucking hate crime that is also ironically anti-Semitic. There is nothing better to describe how the Germans are operating. They love American imperialism because they hate Muslims so much. It's also literally what they did during Kristallnacht, zero self-awareness. Yeah. German minister says she clapped Israeli filmmaker, not his Palestinian colleague. This is the green politician. Yo! Call for green politician to resign amid row over politically charged closing ceremony. Dude, everything that I hear about like contemporary German politics as it pertains, bro, I never want you to hear you say anti-Deutsche or leftist / anti-fascista again, okay? They are so fucking vile. I mean, it's embarrassing, but like, isn't that how they present themselves ultimately? Like, yes, they are at odds with these principles that they claim to espouse, but I think that's like a uniquely German phenomenon. That's what I'm trying to explain here. Obviously, they are not. They are as leftist as the MAGA communists are. From the AP headline recently, Google it if you must. Germans thought they were immune to nationalism. After confronting the Nazi past, they were wrong. Dude, all the Germans are like, come on, go back. Go back to the fucking American stuff, please. antifascistische Aktion. Dude, it's so good. It's so good. It's so fucking funny. I feel so goddamn vindicated when I talk about like the German collective psyche and how and like what they're oftentimes very nefarious, obviously not the Germans in here, but like the very nefarious reasons as to why they dick ride Israel so fucking hard. It's just like, dude, your forefathers that fought against the Nazis in Germany internally, like the communists, the actual fucking anti-fascists, are literally turning in their goddamn graves in shame with the horror of what is going on in Germany currently. Yeah, Germany also added me into a report. If you remember, Hasan gets mentioned in a report from the Bundesverband RIAS about the anti-Semitic reactions in Germany on the Hamas massacre in Israel. Ein Twitch-Streamer bekannt als HasanAbi, der 2.6 Millionen Follower in Hand streamte, wo 40.000 Zuschauenden, von denen die größte Gruppe aus Deutschland kam, als Verbrechen der Hamas verharmloste, bis die Gewalt gegen die Zivilbevölkerung als Gewalt gegen Zionisten und Siedler rechtfertigte. Auf der Plattform X schreibt eine Person, Israel is no more inshallah, so Gott will, sowie 2 Raketen-Emojis. Auch wenn es sich bei den genannten Fällen nicht um antisemitische Verfälle nach RIAs Kategorien handelt, verweisen sie auf die breite Zustimmung zu den Massakern der Hamas und eine Verherrlichung des Terrors und lassen auf ein vorhandenes antisemitisches Weltbild schließen. Insgesamt wird gerade auf Social Media eine sehr gewaltverherrlichende Sprache verwendet. Here's the actual translation. A Twitch live streamer known as HasanAbi, who has over 2.6 million followers, streamed in front of 40,000 viewers, the 4th largest group of whom were from Germany, as he trivialized Hamas crimes and justified violence against civilians as violence against Zionists and settlers. Even if the cases mentioned are not anti-Semitic incidents according to RAIS categories, they point to the broad approval of Hamas's massacres and the glorification of terror and suggest an existing anti-Semitic worldview. Yeah, they put me, I remember reading the report, they put me into a category where they sandwich me in between like openly anti-Semitic sentiments, if I recall correctly, recognized that what I was saying wasn't anti-Semitic, but it kind of has the vibes of anti-Semitism. What can I say? But it's hard to, it's not hard to get Germans to go in for a bit of genocide. Yes. So here's the thing. As I was saying before, Germans obviously have a lot of guilt for the Holocaust. Okay. A lot. And what they feel like with respect to Israel is that like, it's not necessarily just the guilt of the Holocaust that causes them to be like super on board with everything that Israel does. No, they don't. Okay, a lot of Germans have a lot of guilt for the Holocaust, except for the AfD, which is gaining prominence, of course. However, he's exaggerating the situation that anti-Deutsche is only a very small part of the whole leftist clique. Brother, when we're talking about the Green Party or like liberal, supposedly quote unquote leftist Germans, also taking this like insane stance, this laughable stance, like German minister saying she clapped for the Israeli filmmaker, not his Palestinian colleague who said the exact same thing at Berlinale, and like, and now there's calls for her to resign. Come on, there's something else going on. My point is this: I think that the collective guilt, not only obviously in somewhat of a performative capacity, pushes like the overarching German narrative to be like super pro-Israel unconditionally. But I think there's also a secondary, very nefarious purpose, which is to say, look, sure, maybe our grandfathers did some stuff, okay, which we recognize is bad and wrong. But you know who's currently doing a very real genocide? The Arabs. This way, they can shift the blame in a very nefarious, very sinister way, shift the blame away from the Germans directly to a common enemy that Israel has with a lot of Germans, Arabs, and Islam in general. Exactly. You get to transfer guilt with Zionist approval. 100%. That's what it is. They don't defend Israel because of guilt. They hate Muslims. It's all Islamophobia. Here they hate Arabs, North Africans, and Turks just for being Muslims. Only 24% of Germans think Israel is a partner for Germany. France 78, USA 45. 50% say Israel's actions are going too far. Only 28 say it's appropriate. I wrote a thread explaining it. The level of German political comedy is just anti-Arab racism. Look, all Arabs love Hamas and are not friends with Nazis because both hate Jews, while the whites are the only ones with arguments because all Arabs are the same and incapable of thought. Germans projected their guilt and nationalism onto the state of Israel. That's why you don't see outside retaliations like October 7th. Like on October 7th, the whole German establishment and media with Palestinian flags are demanding an end to the occupation and apartheid. They want that. It's not even discussed. The media, Germans don't even acknowledge the apartheid. It is complicated. There is a German word for making something more controversial on purpose. Verkomplizieren. Human rights scholars and their findings are irrelevant. Not just irrelevant, but in the eyes of the Germans, they are wrong. Because apartheid cannot have good meaning in the eyes of liberals, rightfully so. So they wash it away, ignore it, and fully drop into the right-wing extreme Zionism. You think BB's racist? Get ready for the Germans. Verkomplizieren. Yeah, Germans have insane words for everything. It's kind of cool. The word is just overcomplicating. Okay, well, my favorite German word is Kümmerspeck that I learned when I was growing up and learning German in school. Kümmerspeck, the weight a person gains during a period of overeating due to unhappiness, depression, grief, or other emotional condition. Kümmerspeck. Verkomplizieren. Hasan, do you think that people will come for you, Les, if you had a name like Josh or Brett? Because to be honest, when I first saw someone call you HasanAbi, I was like, there's no way that's not hella racist, right? Like, that has to be Islamophobic. Or do you think that they'd come for you the same amount because of your views and your platform? No, there would be plenty of people who would come for me for being critical of Israel's apartheid. However, there would be an infinitely smaller number of people in comparison, or a very, very different ways in which their criticisms would read to the broader public. Look at Bernie Sanders and Corbyn. Yes, people still come after Bernie Sanders and Corbyn, but when people even say Corbyn is like pro-Hamas or Corbyn is like, nobody says Corbyn is an Islamist fundamentalist. You know what I mean? Or when they do say that, that kind of doesn't stick. Bernie Sanders is not as aggro on Israel as Corbyn is regardless, but like the attacks are different. Considering that so-called liberal chatter called you an Islamist fundamentalist terrorist not so long ago, I think you're probably right. I mean, they do it every day. There's an entire website dedicated to it. There's literally a fucking entire website dedicated to saying that I'm actually HasanAbi. So yeah, my psychopathic stalkers they go above and beyond. They do everything they physically can to show everyone that they are mentally deeply unwell.
Smaller nearby demonstration that specific.
Nobody's ever called him Corbyn Laden. Yeah, but even if they did, right, the way that reads to a broader public is also different. Do you understand? It's not the same as like a dude who's Muslim, of Muslim background, of Muslim descent, from a Muslim country, whose name is Hasan. When that happens to someone who is like, at least in any way, shape, or form sympathetic to Arabs or Muslims alike, that kind of smear sticks way harder for a lot of people that are looking at that smear.
Specifically criticizing the conduct of the war.
What's the difference between you guys here and the bigger main demonstration over there?
The people here that are like, let's say, more mainstream are mainly calling for the election and tend to be less critical of the war.
Any thread I see about you covering stuff like the war crimes Hamas might have done, the retweets are all people doing Armenian genocide denial claims and thinking your stance is nothing bad happened on October 7th because they never watched any of your take on it that you've ever had. Yeah. It's much easier to smear a white dude as anti-Semitic than Islamist. Yeah. Well, they don't stop the anti-Semitism stuff too. They always, like the Kanye West stan who came in here yesterday to say that while he is a fan of Kanye West, I am the true anti-Semite. That was really funny.
But we say for
the bigger.
A much smaller nearby demonstration that's specifically criticizing the conduct of the war.
What's the difference between you guys here and the bigger main demonstration over there?
the people here that are like, let's say, more mainstream are mainly calling for the election and tend to be less critical of the war. But we say for us to really start, we need to own up to what has been done.
A lot of right-wing people perceive us to be like terrorists, like Hamas, like we're against Israel, which is ridiculous because if I say that the Palestinians have rights, it doesn't mean that I'm against Israelis. I just believe every human being has rights.
Right-wing protesters harass some of the peace activists. Israel's current government includes ultra.
Have you ever feel prejudice for being a Muslim in America? No, because I'm so fucking white looking that no one immediately goes, that's a Muslim, because Islamophobia is very racialized. That's the difference. Americans don't have that German sensibility to fucking sniff out the Turks. Germans are very good at sniffing out people that are not a part of the folk, if you know what I mean, you know? What is this? Bernie is inviting you over. I'm excited to announce that this week I'm launching a new podcast. It's okay to be angry about capitalism. Okay, dude.
Nationalist extremists. And since the war began, the mood in the country has grown even more hardline.
In terms of the mainstream protests we're seeing on the streets, they really revolve around either Israeli suffering or internal dynamics, not what people are protesting about in Britain or Europe.
100%. In fact, the moment people start talking about genocide and war crimes, people circle the wagons. People feel that, okay, this is too much. And then they start, you know, this is anti-Semitism, and they've always been anti-Israeli, and they don't understand the reality.
Back with Sophia, she's preparing for another stint in jail. She'll keep being sent to prison until either she or the army relents.
What do you think explains the disconnect between how you're seeing what's happening in Gaza, how much of the world is seeing what's happening in Gaza, and how most of the rest of Israeli society is seeing it?
In Israel in general, there's a very, very strong notion of dehumanization of the Palestinians. And while the rest of the world sees thousands of people get...
They keep sending you to jail? Yes, if you're a conscientious objector, you go to jail. And you get out of jail, and then only to... It's like a restarting process. They send you to jail over and over again. I guess until one side gives up. Yeah. The take I have on, you know, these guys are no different than like... Yeah, Tal Mitnick, friend of the show, is also in and out of jail over and over again. Is the same as like the KPD, you know what I mean? Is the same as is the same as like people resisting against like the rise of fascism in Germany. They see their fascist government, they recognize it as being fascist, and they're doing everything they can to physically stop that. Yeah, they deserve all the respect. They're very brave. KPD is the Communist Party of Deutschland.
Getting killed and injured and displaced in Gaza, the people in Israel, a lot of them just see the enemy. When you have such strong racism being told to you as the correct narrative from a very, very young age, it's really hard to break through that.
In Israel, the prevailing view is that Hamas and its brutal rampage is responsible for all the bloodshed. The choking rage and existential fear of the early days of the war has begun to fade. But the anger and trauma of October the 7th is now ingrained in this nation's psyche and overrides anything else.
That about does it for the Israel proportion of the broadcast.